Hi and welcome to another episode of Pennsylvania Voter Information Network. I am your host, Larry DeMarco, and today we are here with Margo Davidson, Pennsylvania State Representative of the 164th Legislative District. She has been in office since 2010. Margo, thank you for being a guest on Pennsylvania Voter Information Network.
Thank you, Larry. Thanks for having me.
Excuse me, Representative Davidson. Representative, we are filming 2 days after that mass walkout by the students protesting gun violence. What would you like to see Harrisburg do in response?
Well, it's time for Harrisburg to pass sensible gun legislation. There's been a series of press conferences that I've been involved in that has basically urged our leadership to consider a number of bipartisan bills that should be considered that have widespread popular support, that being the elimination of bump stocks, the elimination of automatic rifles and automatic weapons, making sure that the National Clearinghouse gets mental health data for involuntary commitments. And so those are just some of the things that has already been on the table in the Pennsylvania legislature, but has not received not even a committee vote in the legislature.
So this is what Pennsylvania is trying to do. Bump stocks, ban assault weapons, and better security or better background checks for mental health issues.
Yes. So, and also making sure that there's criminal background checks for gun shows. So I have legislation that would improve the criminal background checks for gun shows where it's a huge loophole there. People can purchase guns at gun shows currently and not necessarily go through the background checks that usually would be required if you went to a gun store. And also the other legislation that I'm an author of is the legislation to make sure that the National Clearinghouse gets the information from Pennsylvania for people who are suffering with chronic and persistent mental illness that has caused them to be involuntarily committed on any occasion.
Representative Davidson, bipartisan support. What gives? Why no movement?
The leadership has been just obstinate in not allowing those bills to come up for a vote. I understand that now we have a retiring member of the Republican Party, the chair of the Judiciary, who has talked about doing a hearing. I'm not sure if that hearing is scheduled for some of the legislation that has bipartisan support. Those four bills in particular have authors and co-sponsors from both parties, but the leadership of the Republican Party has refused to bring those bills up for a vote.
What's going on here? Is the NRA basically donating to the right cogs in the wheel to stop all this?
Yes, because what people don't understand is that in legislatures, both in Harrisburg and in Washington, the leadership of the majority party really has all the power. We can vocalize our opposition, we can vote against stuff, but the numbers demonstrate that one party has the power. And in this instance, it's the Republican Party. And in this instance, the Republican leaders are huge beneficiaries of NRA dollars.
Representative, you are a leader in speaking up against workplace harassment and abuse. What does the Me Too movement and the need for it say about our society?
Well, I think it's encouraging that women are no longer silent about abuse, harassment, and even violence that they have suffered for years. And women are accustomed to suffering in silence. That is the reason that so many rapes go unreported or underreported. It might be reported initially, but then there's a drawback. Because the stigma of being harassed, the stigma of being physically abused, and even the stigma of being raped is akin to the actual act. And sometimes the pushback that happens after a woman comes forward is more than she can bear. It adds insult to injury. And so that is why women have been silent on these issues and not willing to defend themselves. But I'm encouraged that women are Silent No More. And the hashtag Me Too allow women to say, yes, this has happened to me too.
And it's somewhat depressing to hear it happened to someone else also, and all these names lining up. But on a positive note, Time's Up. Explain that. What's going on with the Time's Up hashtag?
And that's why I'm a large proponent of hashtag Time's Up, even more so than hashtag Me Too. I think hashtag Me Too allowed women to no longer be silent. But taking that one step further, now women can have the courage to be silent no more. No longer should women have to wait 30 years, 10 years, 20 years, 6 years, or 5 years before they seek justice, or even 1 year. We're saying hashtag Time's Up. No longer do women have to be silent. There will be recourse, and there will be some remedy to the pain that she suffered. So women should be safe in their homes, in school, and in their workplace.
And it doesn't have to be some kind of death knell, time's up. It can be more a positive awareness thing that now our teens, our male teens, can be raised with good, equal rights and proper behavior, morality, and seeing their classmates as equals. Right, Margo?
That's exactly right. And so, I heard a saying one time, which I thought was very keen observation. A gentleman said it. He said, I tell men that they should not say anything to a woman that they wouldn't want a fellow inmate to say to them in jail. So think about, what you would deem as a acceptable behavior, your space, what you want to be said to you, and whether or not you want to be approached in that way in the workplace. And so hashtag Time's Up is really about holding public officials accountable. The legislation that I've authored under the banner hashtag Time's Up is really about holding public officials accountable, because public officials can't be fired from their jobs. So this will allow them to be exposed for the behaviors that we see happening right here in Delaware County, as a matter of fact.
So Time's Up refers to public officials, but what can we learn in our own homes and our own workplaces, in the private workplace as well?
Treat each human being with respect and dignity. Whether your partner's in a same-sex relationship, or you're a part of a workforce environment, or you're in a heterosexual relationship, treat each human being with an equal measure of respect. Do unto others as you would have done unto you.
Last November, you held a policy committee meeting regarding mental health treatment versus mass incarceration. Going back to guns, every time we hear a shooting, the NRA or somebody says we have to keep guns away from crazy people or the crazies. That type of language, how does that affect someone with mild depression symptoms and their willingness to seek mental health treatment?
Well, it's very damaging, Larry, and I'm glad you asked this question because that kind of language has no place in our public discourse. Mental health is a serious illness that should be treated. It is treatable. It should not be treated any different than any physical sickness or illness. And so to say that really begins to diminish people's humanity, and that's not what we should be about in our society. And so I stood with fellow legislators just this past week in Harrisburg to say that the mental health community is less responsible for violence than any other segment of the community. And people in the mental health community are more likely to be the victims of assault and of violence and of discrimination than any other community. And so we want people to be able to seek treatment. Most of the time, people in the mental health community who don't receive treatment wind up in prison because of very minor offenses. Because they're, a lot of times they're either depressed, psychotic, bipolar, schizophrenic, And so there's a detachment from reality. And so that causes their decision making to be altered. And a lot of times it's very minor stuff. Walking to a store in the wrong yard, driving in the wrong car. All of those things are kind of behaviors that are misdemeanor summary offenses that a massive amount of people with mental health problems wind up going to jail. And so Mary Scullion, who is a champion of social justice in Philadelphia, Sister Mary Scullion, said 10 years ago when mental health hospitals closed that prisons would become the mental health hospitals of our day. And that day is now. And so we need to have a society that treats mental illness with parity in the same way that we treat physical illness, and let the gun conversation and sensible gun reform have a separate track. Yes, people that have been involuntary committed need to have that status known and recognized, but that's a small fraction of the mental health community.